By the time we arrived to the cabin, the snow had begun to fall, thick, silent, and never-ending. Just enough of it was illuminated by our headlights to show the contour of a partially white roof. It ought to have been vacant. However, laughter reverberated back at me as I pushed the door open. A couple was standing by the fireplace, holding wine glasses and half turning in astonishment. The wind rushed in around me as if it wanted to explain, and for a moment we all just stared at one another. The woman then grinned. We appear to have been double booked. Her partner displayed the same confirmation I had by holding up his phone. Same cabin, same weekend. Outside, the snow was getting heavier every minute. It's too late to leave, too heavy to dispute. We reached a silent consensus. 4 individuals, 1 fire, 1 night. There wasn't much room. 1 table, 2 couches, and hardly enough space to move around without bumping into someone. My spouse dismissed it with a laugh and described it as an adventure. I simply nodded and accepted the mug that the other man extended to me. He had a warm hand. I sensed a change in the air before the first log cracked, a proximity that wasn't appropriate for strangers. Make sure you're subscribed before I explain how one night turned into something that none of us could reverse. How far it went will be interesting to hear. We were trapped by that. By dark, the storm engulfed the last light. The fire's lone remaining flame flickered over 4 faces while they pretended not to notice one another. The wind outside seemed to be trying to get inside by pushing against the walls. We pretended to unwind indoors. With a wineglass balanced on her knee, Ivy, the young lady, sat cross-legged on the rug. Lucas, her companion, had his arm casually slung behind her as he rested against the stone fireplace. I couldn't seem to be as comfortable as my husband, who was laid out on the couch across from me and had already loosened his collar. We discussed travel, our origins, and our desired destinations. Lucas was a city man who gave off the impression that he had never experienced the cold. Ivy kept talking over him, making fun of him, and fixing little aspects in an attempt to make him laugh. Each time she glanced in my direction to see if I was listening, the flames exploded. A spark died close to her hand after leaping out. I instantly leaned forward. She grinned. "Guess we'll both have to stay close if it keeps doing that," she said, just until it warmed up, as she shifted her blanket to sit on the edge of the couch next to me. Her scent was gentle and recognizable, something flowery that made it hard to distinguish between my warmth and hers. The faint sound of my husband's voice came from the other side of the room. Compared to us, you two appear more at ease. My laughter didn't sound as strong as I intended. Nobody went to check the time when the mantel clock struck 10. The porch was entirely submerged by the snow outside. We were confined. 1 fire, 4 people, and a quiet that was beginning to breathe on its own. It was innocuous, just a little warmth between strangers, I told myself. That would not perish. The storm continued to rage. Long, continuous gusts of wind beat against the windows, rattling the glass as if to see how much we could withstand. The fire inside had burned low, but would not go out. Sparks drifted as if they wanted to stay, each log falling into a deeper orange. Our damp jackets, which were steaming faintly in the heat, hung close to the door. The scent of red wine, pine, and smoke permeated the air. Beside me, Ivy tucked her legs under the blanket. Lucas had opened another bottle and was pouring it gently while passing it across the room with half of his gaze fixed on me. "You ever notice," he said, "how people mirror each other when they're getting along?" I tried to sound nonchalant as I smiled. "Is that your theory or hers?" Evie cocked his head in his direction. "He has a body language obsession. Like the weather, he reads people." "Storm's easy," my spouse whispered. "You can see it coming." Lucas chuckled, a low, quiet sound that felt more appropriate for the space than for him. True, but sometimes you only realize you're in it when it's already too late. Once more, the fire broke out. The warmth pressed in. Ivy pretended to grab for her glass while leaning her shoulder into me. She muttered, "Sorry," without turning away. More than her weight, I could feel the heat, the gentle tug of contact that was no longer accidental. My husband's unreadable eyes darted toward us and then away as he said, "Across the room." Lucas moved to settle on the rug nearer the fire after pouring another round. The line of his smile and the contour of his jaw were captured by the shadows. He continued to speak. There was a reference to light and reflection, but nobody paid much attention. Now the firelight moved through the breath-like space with its own rhythm. He replied, "Ivy laughed to something," and she brushed my ear with the sound before turning back to face me. "You are quiet," she said in a whisper. I said, "I'm watching." Her mouth twisted, "Then you're already aware." She didn't clarify her meaning. She was not required to. Enough was stated by the fire between us. We all looked at the embers as if we were waiting for someone to get up when the last log broke in two. Nobody did. It was no longer flirting. Between us, gravity was at play. The cabin was silent by midnight. Every breath inside felt louder due to the persistent silence created by the storm outside. The fire had burned all the way to the core, breathing like a living creature, a red pulse in the darkness. It had been ages since anyone had spoken. My spouse had reclined in his chair, either appearing to be asleep or not. Once more, Lucas was by the fireplace, moving the embers to prevent their death. Ivy turned to face me as the glow passed over his hands and her face. She gave me a slight smile, as if we were discussing a secret. "It's too quiet," she said to herself. I said, "Too peaceful," but neither of those words felt accurate. She covered me with her blanket before I could grab it when the blanket dropped from my shoulder. Soft, uncertain, but not timid, her hand lingered a moment longer than it should have. Lucas looked over, saw what was happening, and kept his eyes fixed on it. The quiet became so dense that it was palpable. Smoke, wine, and an electric scent beneath it, that sharp sweetness just before rain, were all present in the air. No one acknowledged hearing the pattern of our breathing, which blended with the sound of the storm outside. His voice was low as he said, when Lucas finally spoke, "Then we make it count," Evie remarked. "There's only enough wood for one more hour of fire." She slid down from the couch to sit closer to the heat. Without giving it any thought, I followed. My husband's expression was unclear as he briefly opened his eyes to see where we had moved before closing them again. Ivy touched me with her hand. Just meeting, not looking. We didn't retreat. All four of us experienced a flickering radiance. One light is changing, flickering, and coming back. Nobody said anything. Nobody pretended any longer. None of us would have noticed if the storm had halted at that precise moment. As we waited to see who would move first, we were all listening to the same silence. Nobody did. Not quite yet. Suddenly the lights went out. The chamber flickered with warm lamplight one moment, and then there was nothing. Everything was cast in black and bronze by the low, pulsating fire. The shadows expanded over the walls before collapsing in on themselves. Someone took a deep breath. Nobody said anything. I adjusted, blinking into the darkness. Even though the storm was still strong, it wasn't any louder than the interior silence. A shift on the couch next to me. "Ivy, you're closer now." Through the blanket, I could feel her legs pressing down on me. Her body was steady, warm, and relaxed. I stayed put. My husband sat still across from the fire. I could feel his gaze even though I could hardly see his face. Not icy, not perplexed, simply motionless. Lucas took the next step. Before I saw him seated at the edge of the dirt, I heard the rustle of fabric. Back to the flames, his orange-framed silhouette. The air between us shimmered because of the heat. As though we needed something to do with our hands, he reached for the bottle once more, but this time he was passing it rather than drinking. Ivy refused to accept it. Rather, she reached under the covers for my hand. just make contact. No delay, no flourish. At first, it was gentle, hardly more than a brush, as if she were asking a question and had run out of words. I didn't have time to consider before my fingers responded. We didn't hold anything. Close. We simply refused to let go. Sparks flew against the glass as the fire broke. Lucas was observing us in the glow. His gaze shifted to our hands and back again. He grinned quietly, as if he already knew. He got up and moved closer before taking a seat on the mat at our feet. My leg was touched by his shoulder. He placed his hand on Ivy's knee and held it there. Once more, the blanket moved, spreading broader and slipping lower. Across the room, I heard my husband's breath. I was merely observing, not upset or shocked. Ivy turned to face me and leaned in, her words barely above breath as her cheek touched mine. "It's warm now," she muttered, "but it doesn't feel like the fire." I didn't respond. I was unable to. A buzz had begun to run through my flesh. Lucas leaned his back into my shins, moving steadily and slowly, as if he were paying attention to the room's beat. His hand raised the blanket's edge once more and tucked it closer over the three of us, sealing us in rather than hiding anything. Then there was movement, shifting, layered, and quiet. Ivy was the first to move, gently putting her arm around my waist and moving closer to me. Her breath caught when I didn't draw away, and I could feel the curve of her smile next to my collarbone. Lucas also changed, lowering himself again after rising a little, his hand grazing my thigh with consent rather than by accident. For bodies, the fire pulsed once, spreading a stream of orange light across 4 faces. There are no longer gaps between us. Fabric sliding is what I heard. I heard a quiet, sweet laugh. I recognized my own name, or perhaps I just made it up, whispered like an unmarked inquiry. I stopped monitoring people's whereabouts. Pressure was present, weight was present. Beneath the blanket, there was warmth that gradually increased and continued to do so. We all moved in unison, gravity, heat, and breath. I couldn't find the time thread. The storm's sound was lost. I no longer felt the floor beneath my feet. First the fire died. With a weary moan, it fell in on itself, leaving behind only the tiniest ember glimmer. The action lessened and slowed. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved. There was only breathing for a while. None of us went for it when the light outside started to get brighter. The frosted glass became silver. Slow, steady drops of melted snow fell from the roof. Without us, the world had changed. I slowly sat up. My spouse remained seated in his chair, but he was now leaning forward with his elbows on his knees and his eyes lowered. When I looked him in the eye, he remained silent. Ivy tucked her hair back into a loose knot and stretched next to me. Lucas got up and discovered his shirt on the ground. He didn't look up when he buttoned it. Nobody went to get their phone, nobody bid farewell. Until the snow stopped falling, we sat there. Until the silence began to feel more like memory than protection. Nobody said they were going. Perhaps we never did. Be truthful before you go. Would you have stayed away or stayed to discover what the stillness was truly saying if you had been stranded in that cabin as the storm approached and the fire burnt low? Let me know in the comments. I read all of them. Please press the bell, like, and subscribe if this story stuck with you. It keeps you here for the next one and helps more than you could imagine.